Welcome. In today's session, I would like to explain to you how to use variables in PowerShell. If you're watching this, you probably haven't used any other programming language before. Variables are used to store information that can easily be accessed later in your code. All variables in PowerShell have to start with the $character. That's how you specify them. You can use any name to store the variables. What I normally like to do is specify the data type. So I put the $character, then the str, that would stand for string, and then use upper and lowercase letters for the name. There's no rule on what you need to do or what you have to use. It's completely up to you what name you'd like to specify. There are some illegal characters that you're not allowed to use, and these include the at sign, the exclamation mark, the and, the hash, the percent, the comma, the dot, and of course the space character. PowerShell will throw an error if you're going to use one of these characters. In other programming languages, you have to specify what sort of variable or what sort of data type you're going to write into the variable. This is not the case in PowerShell. You can store any kind of data type into the variables. So you can store a bit, that's either a 0 or a 1, a string, that is text. You can store integers, these are numbers. You can store an array, that are multiple words that are associated to an index. You can store a hash table. A hash table is something similar to an array, except that you can actually specify what the index name should be, or you can assign an object to the variable. The PowerShell operators that we are going to use are the equal sign. This is used to assign the variable. The plus is used to add something to the variable. The minus is either to subtract or to remove something from the variable. And the star is to multiply. Of course, very useful if you're using integers. And the same with the slash that you'll use to divide something with the variable. Okay, let's talk about strings. Strings are just words that we're storing in the variable. Of course, we're specifying our name by using the $character, using str that specifies it's a string, and then use uppercase and lowercase letters as the name. In this case, we're storing the name test into the variable called str my variable. If we would like to overwrite that variable, we can just call the variable name again and assign something different to that. In this case, this is a test. It's going to overwrite the word test that we had in that variable beforehand. If we want to add something to the variable, we can assign a new variable. So we call a $sign str new with the word new, and to add that to the other variable, we can say we want to assign this is a, then call the word new from a variable and say test. And the result of this will be this is a new test. Other PowerShell operators are the plus and equal sign. These are very useful if you're using integers. You can actually add something to it or increase the variable. You can increase it by itself. You can use the minus and equal sign to decrease it by itself. You can use the star and the equal sign to multiply it by itself. And you can use the slash and the equal sign to divide by itself. Integers, as previously mentioned, you don't have to declare data types, even though I'd like to use it in my name of the variable. To assign the variable, I just assign, so call the name, $int, my variable, and assign a 1 to that value. If I want to add something to the value, I use the plus sign. In this case, the integer value is set to 1. If I plus that by 2, the result will be 2. but you need to remember that the variable will stay at 1. It's not going to increase itself. So the result is 2, but the variable will stay at 1. If you use the plus and equal sign, you are actually adding by itself. So the integer value is going to add itself another whatever value you're specifying. In this case, if you use a plus equal sign 1, the result will be 2, and the variable itself is also going to be at 2. The line at the bottom is just the long way of doing that. So we're specifying the name, and then we're calling the variable which has a number, which a number 1 is assigned to that, plus 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So the result and the variable itself are going to be at 2. All right, arrays. Arrays can store multiple values, and these are accessible by index numbers that are assigned to them. All indexes start at 0. So if we add or if we assign values to an array, we are going to use the at and then open the bracket and call string number 1 with the value string 1, string 2, string 3. The indexes are automatically written to the array. So if we want to get a specific value from that array, we can call whichever index we would like. So in this case, in this example, I'm calling the index called 0. So this will actually return string 1. If I wanted to call the second index, I will call an array with a square bracket 1 that will call string 2, and the same if I would have an array variable square bracket 2 that will actually result in string 3. If we want to change a variable or an array value from that array, we can do that by just specifying the index. So in this case, I'm actually changing the string 3. So I'm calling variable number 2 and assigning string 4 in place of string 3. Hash tables are very similar to arrays. The only difference is that you can actually specify what sort of index you would like to use. You can choose your own name to specify the index. So in this case, we are assigning an index called string 1. We're adding the value 100 to that. We are assigning a string 2. We're adding the value 101. An index called string 3 with the value 102. If we want to read the complete hash table, we just specify that, and it's going to return to us the name and all the values, like the indexes plus all the values that we've assigned. If you want to query the hash table, you need to specify the index, same as in the array. You specify whatever index you would like to call. So I'm calling hash number and then specifying the index. It has to be in square brackets if you want to do this. Adding something, if you want to add a new record, string 4 does not exist, so we're calling the hash numbers. We are adding a new index called string 4, and we're adding a value to that. You can achieve the same if you do something that's called calling a method. The method that we're using is .add and use a normal bracket. We're adding the string number 5 and using the value 222. It's very important that you specify or put a comma in between. That just means that the one part is the index and the second part is the value. If you want to delete a record, you have to call the method called remove. So we're using the hash name or the variable name .remove, and then whichever index that you like to remove. So we're removing string 2 with its value from the hash table. If you want to clear the complete or remove all the records from the hash table, this is always good if you finish your code just to clear up everything. we can use the .clear method that will remove anything that was written into that hash table. Objects. Objects are a representation of something. You can see it as a collection of parts and actions. The parts, you can look at it as an object. If we take an object as a user, the user has a name, it has a surname, first name. These parts are called properties. And then the object can also have instructions or actions, and these are, just as we've used them in the hash tables, these are called methods. So you can also use the .add and remove. These are just called methods that are part of the object. In this example, we are assigning the current user to an object variable. You just call the method getCurrentUser, and we're assigning that complete user object into the variable. If you want to read a specific property from that variable, you can do that by calling or just the part. So you're actually calling the property name. So we assign a .name, and that will return the name from that object. We have some special variables that are default variables from PowerShell. I don't really want to get into too much detail how to use them, but it can be pretty useful if you want to start scripting, and especially if you're using the pipe character. The $_ is going to help you just to shorten your code that you don't have to write too much. But for this, I think I'll try and have a different session, maybe for error handling and especially piping. Those are just beyond the scope. All right, let's wrap this up. I'll show you a couple of examples right in PowerShell ISE. ISE stands for Integrated Scripting Environment. Okay, I've opened Windows PowerShell ISE. Let's get started right away. Okay, first of all, to set a string or declare a string, we're just going to use the equal sign, and to set the variable or the value to that variable. If I want to get the result of what's been written into the value, I can just call the variable and it'll return what has been written into that. Now, if I would like to override an variable, I can just declare a new one, and it's automatically going to override what has been written into that variable. There you go. This is a test. Okay, you can also nest strings within each other. In this case, we're going to declare a new variable and then use the plus sign to nest that into a second variable. I'm going to run that. And again, if I call the variable, you will see that it's been overwritten and that the one variable has been nested within the other one. Okay, let's move on to integers. With integers, we do the same. We just declare it with the equal sign and set a 1 to that. So if I call the integer, you can see that it'll return a 1. If I want to add something to the integer, as I've said before, the result of this will be 2. But if I call the integer again, you'll notice that the integer stays at 1. It does not increase itself. However, if we use the plus equal sign, the integer is going to increase itself by 1. So if I call the value, you'll notice that it has changed to 2. And we can achieve exactly the same. This is just a long way of writing it by saying we're going to have an integer variable, and we'll set that to whatever's been in the integer plus 1. So if I add that, Currently the integer, the variable is at 2, so if we add 1, that integer is going to be at 3. There we go. All right, arrays. To set the array, we use the @ symbol, and we specify the words that we'd like to write to the array, and it automatically indexes the array from 0 to 1, from 0 onwards. Okay, so if we want to call the first integer, that is of course the 0, we can do that by calling the integer called 1. As you can see, it'll return string 1. That was the first integer written into that. And if we want to change a value, so what we're going to do now is we can also, sorry, before I do that, we can also view the complete array. It just shows us all the strings that have been written into the array. So if we would like to change the third value, indexed in number 2, we can do that by running this. And if we just call the complete array, we can see that the third index has been changed, or the index number 2 has been changed to a different value. Okay, for hash tables, let's just write a couple of things to the hash table. Now we also use the @ symbol. To call the hash table, we just call the hash variable, and it will give us the name or the index and the value. Please note that it's not arranged in any order. It just writes it in. Don't ask me how, but that's just the way it works. So if we want to call the index from the string 1, we can do that by just doing that, and it'll return the value that has been allocated to the index or the name string 1. If we want to add a value, we can either add a new index with a new number, and I'm just going to call the complete hash table again. As you can see, string 4 has been added, and if we want, or we can use a method. So the .add is a method. We're going to add the index string with the ID or the value 222. And if I call the complete hash table again, you'll notice that it's been added to the hash table. If we want to remove something, we can use the method .remove. We're going to do that by just supplying the index that we want to remove. So if I call the hash table again, you'll notice that string number 2, or the index string number 2, has been removed. If we want to clear the hash table, like I said, very useful by the end of the script, we can do that by using the method clear. And if I call the hash table this time, you'll notice that it's completely empty. Now, to set objects, I'm going to use a function that is called getDate. You can, on the right-hand side here in ISE, PowerShell ISE, you can get all the functions that are currently installed on your computer. Also, the modules that you've installed, they will be displayed over here, and it just gives you a list of everything that's been installed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the date object. I'm going to call the date function or command and set that as an object. There we go. And in this case, we are going to get a value called year. First of all, I would actually like to show you how the attributes are set. So we're just going to copy that, paste that over here. If I press the dot, the nice thing with ISE, it actually shows you what sort of attributes have been or are available for this object. And if we scroll further down, you'll see the actions that are available that can be used to run as well. Okay, so anything with a square, purple square thing are actions, and everything above that, these are the parameters that are set for that object. So I would like to get the year. Let's press the year, and there you go. the parameter that is set from the value or from the object year is 2015. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the session and I'm looking forward to the next one.